Hi, everyone. It's Alec Crawford, your host for the AI Risk Reward podcast. And our very special guest today is Francisco Quevedo, Executive Director of the Rucker Center for Marketing Advancement. Welcome, Francisco.
Thank you. Thank you. I should add that I'm also an assistant professor there. And now I was elected senator. So,
Wow, you got a lot of stuff going on.
exactly.
And I met you at an event, the SME Forum, which Hazem Gamal and my friend Mario Barbado are involved with that. So pretty awesome stuff there. Um, but I wanted to go back a little bit further to start, where we were corresponding before the show, and you mentioned that you fled your country when you were a successful businessman to jump into academia. I mean, that demands a story.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes. We fell under a socialist regime since 19, I think it was 1999. I'd say 20 years of suffering socialism, which meant, price controls, the absence of just about anything, long lines to buy bread. People would use WhatsApp to communicate where there's milk, for example, and then you'd see long lines to buy milk, sugar, anything, even gasoline. And I'm talking about an oil exporting country. After, let's say, 20 years, and because of the insecurity, we decided to leave the country. We had businesses there. We had a foundation, a very successful foundation. I wasn't teaching because of my, let's say, position in front of the regime, so I wasn't teaching anymore. We decided to leave. That was in 2016. And I went from being a homeowner to a tenant. I went from being the boss and the owner of the company to being at first unemployed, because when I came, I finished my PhD first. So I was, for a semester at least, I was unemployed, and they employed me immediately to teach at that university. And then I was an employee. So it was quite a change for me, and quite an expense, I would say, quite an investment. And of course, it was a total change of life. My wife, my daughter, it was, totally new for us. Luckily, 9 years later, we've been, let's say, able to stabilize. We're not using our savings anymore. So we're, let's say, acting and living as normal Americans, you would say. But yeah, it was quite the change for us.
Wow. Oh, that's an incredible story. And so what sparked your interest in strategic planning and marketing? Obviously, you were at the Eisenberg School of Management. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes, that was part of my education. I studied economics and marketing at the beginning at UMass in Amherst, Massachusetts, and then I did an MBA and a diploma, which was called an advanced degree in corporate strategic planning. So that got me into strategic planning. And I went back to my country. That was in 1983. And I worked for 30 years, maybe 33, saying to my wife every single year, I'm going to go back and finish the PhD. Every single year I'd say it. But, it took a socialist government to push me out of the country. So strategic planning and marketing analytics and things like that was, what I did for roughly 30 years, not just for our companies in insurance and sports and agriculture, but as a consultant, of course,
Oh,
for
cool.
big corporations like DuPont or Liberty Mutual and things of the kind. Then, when I came back to the US and went back to academia, went back to teaching, I specialized in what would be, I'd say, neuromarketing. The essence of targeting your consumers' feelings and sensations and things like that. And now, I guess, perhaps I would say better equipped to do strategic planning. Why? Because I have a more solid academic background, today.
That's great. Yeah, you mentioned your dissertation committee chair, Dr. Pardeep. Gopala Krisha. If
Exactly.
hopefully I pronounced that
Yeah.
correctly.
Gopala Krishna, which means the shepherd of God.
Wow. So he shepherded your thesis dissertation apparently too. But
Exactly.
so tell us a little bit more about it. What made him so amazing?
Well, he identified with my interests, because when you go to get a doctorate, you have to identify and define your interest at first, and the graduate school has to feel that it is, let's say, something of interest to them, and he identified with it because it was marketing at its essence, trying to delight the consumer, not just satisfy the consumer, but delight the consumer. So he guided me in terms of learning about, and I'll tell you the number exactly, 100 authors and their theories. And when you have the comprehensive exams, they'll ask you about anyone. They'll ask you, I don't know, things like, and what measures reliability in a scale like a survey? Oh, Chromebooks Alpha. And who invented Chromebooks Alpha? God, you have to remember all those things. So he told me to memorize, 100 theories and 100 authors, and I think that was perhaps the most important recommendation he could have made, because it made me really what I am today. It made me, I don't know, let's say, control the theoretical foundations of marketing. So I really thank him for that, and appreciate him for that. I write with him from time to time.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm a lifelong learner, and you know what I tell people, especially early in their career, is your value is what you know and what you learn, as well as who you meet, right? And if you're in a job and you're not learning anything, you're in the wrong job, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So you also mentioned a book called Unequal Development by Samir Amin. Pitch the audience on the book.
Amin, who's an Egyptian, writes from the left. Okay, he writes a, let's say, Marxist opinion, if you wish, a Marxist analysis of development and underdevelopment. And basically, his theory says that underdeveloped countries fell into like a vicious cycle where they became specialized producers of cheap raw materials like oil or coffee or iron ore and things like that, while the advanced countries would become specialized producers of high technology. And in that sense, the, let's say, advanced countries, of course, the Marxist view would be exploited the opportunities of less developed countries, and began to buy their raw materials cheaply, their raw, let's say, their human resources and labor cheaply, and they sold to these countries expensive technology, expensive, let's say, refined gasoline against their cheap oil prices. And that made, let's say, the two patterns of development differ and distance themselves. Underdeveloped countries became more and more underdeveloped because they became more and more specialized in producing, let's say, oil, not refining it. And advanced countries became more and more advanced because they specialized in refining the oil that they bought cheaply from third world or less developed countries. And that's what he calls unequal development. And why it is fascinating to me is, how can you get out of that, let's say, vicious cycle? How can less developed countries then get out of that cycle? Well, the answer is quite simple, right? Well, I'm not going to say stop producing oil, but I am going to say try to find things to do with the oil, like refining it and finding, let's say, ways to produce plastics and develop plastics industries and things of the kind. I mean, try to jump into the technological side of what you're making. If you're a coffee producer like Brazil or Colombia, try to get into the, I don't know, let's go as far as the franchises to, don't just be Juan Valdez planting coffee, but try to be Starbucks in generating value to the end consumer. The answer seems simple, but it is not that simple. And countries are kind of condemned to that unequal development. And that's, to me, it's fascinating because I would love to be able to help countries in reaching or at least getting into a path of economic development and technological advancement.
Yeah, I mean, one of the super interesting things going on today is obviously AI and generative AI really, taking off. And there is some concern, at least where I am on the executive board at the Global AI Ethics Institute, that access to AI, these models, is not going to just differ within countries, but among countries, meaning obviously in the US, we've got very good access to AI personally and in many cases professionally for business. Like, do you think that this could really potentially help less developed countries, or is this just going to expand the gap?
No, I think as long as it is an advanced technological tool, they should embrace it. So if it is AI that we're gonna, be speaking about, yes, definitely they should embrace it and try to use it to get into that lane of, faster development for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That sounds super important. Um, so in your consulting work and at school at this point, like tell us how you're using AI. Obviously, there's so many amazing potential use cases.
Yeah, let's start with consulting, so I can then talk about school. In consulting, I use AI all the time as a co-pilot, meaning if I have to do some research for a client, let's just say a client of mine requests me to write a business plan. Okay. I use AI to do the initial search. I know AI may not produce the type of strategy, the detail that he's expecting, but I can use it as a co pilot. What I tell my students then is use AI as a co pilot, but never let go of the steering wheel because you have the control. You have to remain in control because AI may not provide you with the type of detail. Let's say it's not going to draw for you a strategy map, and if it does, in terms of drawing, it may lack the detail and the sequences necessary for that strategy to be successful. So our students, we teach them, we encourage them to use AI. Matter of fact, I tell them you have to do 3 article reviews per semester. Let's just say they're reviewing one of my articles, the last one being okay, CRXM, 360-degree customer centricity. Okay, evaluate my article. Remember that you have to find an external citation to oppose it. Somebody who says something else, something different, all right? AI won't do it for them. AI will summarize the article and do a great job at that, but they seem to have trouble finding the opposing view. It's simple, right? Maybe the article is so new that the opposing view is not known. It's not out there, so AI won't find it, right? So you have to be a bit creative in order to find, let's say, okay, if you can't find somebody who can oppose CRXM, 360-degree customer centricity, try to find somebody who is still for CXM or CRM. And then you break down my acronym CRXM in two and find 2 authors who still maintain that CRM should be done and CXM should be done, and perhaps separately. When my contention is that they should be joined together. So there's still that lack of detail, but we tell them try it, okay, and see how it comes out, and then you'll begin to learn a little more about AI and its, I don't know, infinite possibilities, but at the same time, limitations.
Cool. Are there any specific use cases or anything your students are using it for right now, or
Yeah,
any
yeah,
particular apps you
definitely.
recommend?
Yeah, they have used it for market research. You can ask, and I have. You can ask AI to give you a, let's say, SWOT analysis with the proper prompt of a specific case, especially if they're writing, let's say, two of my classes do real live consulting. All right. So let's say they're working with a particular company. Let's just say, mom and pop store or a new franchise down the corner. Okay. They can ask AI to give them a SWOT analysis or to give them proper business intelligence, marketing intelligence, and things like that. So they use it in their cases, whether they are real life or let's say case studies. Walmart in Germany, big, failure of Walmart. I asked him to make a contrast between the success of Walmart in the U.S. and its failure in Germany. What happened there? My view is that Walmart did not understand and know how to read the German consumer and the German market, and it read very well the American market. But I tell them, it's my view. It's not artificial intelligence. It's my limited intelligence. Seeing Germans driving Mercedes and BMWs to the corner store and looking at Walmart here and seeing, well, these are not the cars that I'm looking at here. So it's a different perspective in that sense. So they use AI for market research, business intelligence, to a certain degree, strategy creation, especially the SWOT analysis and the brainstorming and things of the kind. And it does provide great information. Okay. They also use it for article reviews because I tell them, you need to learn, let's say, more deeply about what certain people have said. There's a theory, for example, in terms of retail marketing, which is called product contagion. It's by Morales and Fitzsimmons. They say that if you go to the store and you see rat poison being placed on the shelf next to flour, like corn flour or wheat flour, the consumer will react negatively because he'll feel that it's gonna in some way contaminate or affect the let's say pureness of the flour. So that's called product contagion. I tell them to get into the theory and understand it because it is important for retail. And as I said before, they have to find an opposing view. Who says it doesn't matter? Okay, or who says, for example, that in a small store, convenience store at a gas station, you can't do it. I mean, who says, what do I do if I just don't have the space to keep the products separate? Okay, so that's like the dynamics in class. They use AI. They challenge AI to be creative, to be analytical, and of course, it is my challenging them to be critical because I tell them, don't come out of this class with just my view, with just one view, even analyze one single article, always finding an opposing view because there's always two different truths. And I lived it, 20 years under socialism. Okay, that's Karl Marx. And then I'm living under capitalism. Well, that's Adam Smith. And there's two books, and there's the Quran, and there's the Bible. And then, so there's different views for just about anything in the world. So that's my challenge to them, and that's the challenge for them in using AI.
Sounds amazing. I mean, going back to strategic planning, the integration of AI there really can create a lot of ethical challenges and questions. How do you address that with your class?
To be honest, of course, there's always this question in the mind of the professor whether allowing students to use AI is ethical because they could be cheating. And I say, God, we can't go back to the years when teachers said you can't use the calculator, in
Right,
math
right.
exam. You know, what is this? We're going to go back to the abacus or counting with your fingers and things like that. So AI is the thing of the present and the future. So use it. Let's motivate him. So that question set aside, which we did last semester, we said, no, we have to teach him how to use it. We have to motivate him to use it. I have not honestly found any, let's say, questionable ethics or ethically questionable items coming out of AI when they do their research. Certainly, it is on them to double check and things like that, but I have not honestly found any, let's say, ethical questions regarding the use, other than the professor again that last year, all the professors asking whether this was right. Okay.
Yeah,
And our answer was, yes, it is. Okay.
got it.
So let's move forward.
Now, as you're consulting for some of these large companies, are they bringing up potential ethical questions around AI as well, or are they more interested? Let's get the use case out there and do all this stuff, and then worry about that later.
No. Again, in terms of companies, either I have not, let's say, confronted any issue, ethical issue, and
Hmm.
I've worked with the best. I mean, DuPont, for example, we created in DuPont a an AI powered strategy mapping tool for middle school and high school students, in which was in the end used in Brazil. It was tested in Venezuela in 600 schools. It was basically DuPont lending their um, let's say hardware, if you wish, in their clouds and things like that, to allow students in class to do their own live strategy mapping. That was AI at its best. Okay, so I mean, DuPont never questioned the let's say the ethical validity of this process. It embraced it. The Venezuelan government did not embrace it. And that's another issue. That's a political issue. And we'd be talking here until tomorrow. The Brazilian government said, this sounds good. Let's use it. And our intention, DuPont's intention, they came to me and they said, listen, can we use your strategy mapping um, process and methodology to teach students to take control of their destiny by creating an AI powered tool that will allow them in class and at home to create their own strategy maps? And I said, yes. My daughter was the guinea pig, by the way, when she was, I don't know, she might have been 12 or something like that. And now it's something that you're using, because they said, if we can't, the CEO of DuPont in Wilmington said, we cannot continue to give communities ambulances and schools and things like that. We have to do things that will change the world, that will change the way they live. And one of the presidents, the one for DuPont Andina, which goes from Venezuela to Bolivia, said, if I can make the high school student take control of his destiny by planning his own life at 15 years of age, I will be making a contribution to change those countries. And that was the essence of that AI powered strategy mapping tool.
Amazing. What an amazing story. So now we head into our advice section. So, look, you talk to a lot of CEOs, and you don't have to name any specific companies, but let's just take a hypothetical Fortune 500 company that really hasn't adopted AI yet, right? Because whether they're concerned about safety or security or whatever. And now they're going to go, they've looked around and said, oh, well, it's time to do AI. Like, what's your advice to that CEO in terms of adopting AI? What should they start with?
I'll give them the same example I gave the professors when we discussed the ethics of students using AI. I told them, basically, are we going to go back to the years when we didn't let students use the calculator in mathematical exams or math exams? So I would tell I would perhaps, speak in metaphor to that CEO and tell him, there was a time when you weren't allowed to use the calculator. Remember the HPs, Hewlett Packards, when you had to enter the number and then press enter and things like that? Remember that? Remember
Hmm.
they didn't let you use it in class? Yes. All right. Don't be that. Don't be that teacher, and don't be that student. All right. There you have it. Exactly. All right. So there was a time when we thought that the world was flat. Let's not go back to that. So
Yeah.
it's AI is, I think it's unstoppable. I hope that it does stay its course in terms of ethics, because I have seen it used in political let's say arenas, rather unethically, creating, well, you've seen it here in the US, creating videos of a candidate speaking in terms that the public wouldn't like, when it was all created by AI. So
Yeah.
let's let's try to stay within ethical, let's say, parameters, but let's understand that there's always going to be somebody misusing it. Okay,
Yeah.
but not for that. Somebody might be misusing the calculator, trying to think, I don't know, how many gallons can I steal, in this gas station? Okay, that's going to happen. Not for that reason are we going to stop using calculators. Same goes for artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Well, there's now a recent law in the U.S. that allows or that mandates deep fakes get taken down off of public platforms. So they're starting to they're starting to catch up with the laws, but they're not quite there yet. Well, let's see. Let's head to our final section, which is the lightning round, where I mention different things, and you tell me if you think that they're underrated or overrated and why. And since you're in New Jersey, I'm going to kick it off with the Newark Museum of Art. Underrated or overrated?
Underrated.
I'm sure it is, because think of all the museums in New York City. Right? It's like
Yeah.
everybody just goes there. Um, Peter Drucker, underrated or overrated?
I would have to say underrated because I do have the name Peter Drucker very high up, because he made complex management seem very simple. He said something that I love. He says strategy is about deciding, planning is about acting. Strategy is about deciding to do the right things. Planning is about doing these things right. So I credit Peter Drucker for what I tell my students. Strategic planning is doing the right things right.
Wow,
And that's
amazing.
quite a contribution. And it sounds so simple because you
Yeah,
can do the wrong things right, or the right things wrong, or the wrong things wrong, or do as Rucker says, the right things right, or the right things correctly. That's Peter Drucker for me. So definitely, if I say that, in response to your answer, he's been underrated, it might be because I hold him in such high esteem.
fair enough. Big data analytics for marketing, underrated or overrated?
Wow, good question. I lean toward overrated but underused.
Oh, I like that. Uh, AI in strategic planning, underrated or overrated?
Given my initial comments, I would say overrated and perhaps underused again.
Mhm. The role of social media in brand building, underrated or overrated?
You're asking a 69-year-old person to judge social media. If I had 30 years less, I would tell you underrated. Since I'm 69, I might tell you overrated. So I don't know if I'm right.
Yeah. Well, and who knows what's going to replace social media? It may be influencing the chat, the AI, right? Remote work for strategic teams, underrated or overrated?
Wow, good question. Since my students do remote work in strategic planning and they've done so well, you know, I'm seeing the replies from their clients. I would tend to say underrated because I know, the results have been pretty good.
Yeah. I think as long as they're motivated, it's all great. It's I, I've noticed that for two issues with fully remote, like during COVID, one was onboarding new team members, just much harder, right? Um, that was certainly a big issue, and the other was mentoring um, new new graduates, right? Just much harder to mentor someone who just graduated from school if they're not in an office. But anyway, but other than that, I think it's great.
I don't know. I think remote work. As long as there is visual contact. God, there's honestly very little difference between physical contact. I mean, I meet with my assistant, graduate assistant, every week, and we meet, remotely. Do I have to be in the same office, breathing the same air? Is that going to make any difference at all?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. Matter of fact, if I'm meeting with her, she's in front of her keyboard and I tell her, "Did you send this?" And she checks, "I did. Look at, oh, okay." So we have that, let's say, connection in that sense. So if we were meeting in our office or my office, it might be paper. There might be a desk between us. There might not be computers. I don't know. But, really, Zoom and Google Meets and all these, different platforms, they facilitate the meetings. So
Absolutely. Sustainability in business strategy, underrated or overrated?
good question. Because I'd have to think of different examples. Um, Sustainability, perhaps underrated or underused. Um, Remember, strategy is about the long term, while planning is about the short term, medium term at most. I use usually 3 year strategy maps and 1 year rotating AOPs, annual operating plans. So planning has to look into the long term, and looking into the long term forces you to think of sustainability for sure. All right. But the plan, keeps, plowing forward and forward. So I think people don't use it well enough. People don't, let's say, define sustainable strategies well enough. They don't look far enough. Okay. They don't look deep enough, and they don't look to the sides. It all depends on the type of analysis that you do. You have to look at your context. You have to see what is not visible,
Yeah.
and that is hard. Okay. And sometimes it's a trend, but sometimes it's a disruption that you just can't see and you cannot expect. Nobody expected COVID. Now we're always looking for a new virus. Now it's the measles and things like that.
Yeah.
So now we're, more sensitive to that, but nobody, expected that type of disruption to
Yeah.
occur.
Yeah. Using AI to personalize customer experience in the
Wow.
future, not today,
Yeah.
underrated or overrated?
Um, Today, very underused, perhaps overrated. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I'll give you my personal view. I wish that AI was used as intensely for the benefit of the consumer than it is for the benefit of the provider. I feel that AI today is being used for the benefit of who sells the product and provides the service,
Yeah.
not for who pays for it.
Yeah.
So
Very, very good point.
it is making work easier, but not necessarily making the customer experience any better, more delightful, easier, and things like that.
Mike Tyson, underrated or overrated?
Good question. Um, I've done, as you know, kickboxing and karate for 55 years. So my answer will be from a professional point of view. I've boxed amateur in, national championships. So I know what it is to hit and get hit. Great hitter, not a great boxer, but with a heart that, you couldn't fit in a, I don't know, small truck. So I would say he's underrated. He would be, in my opinion, he would have been the Rocky Marciano of the 1990s. Okay. And he was unbeatable until they beat him.
Yeah, until they beat him. Well, everybody slows down at some point. And then I'm not sure if you've seen this show, but a very interesting science fiction TV show called Altered Carbon. Have you ever seen that show?
No, no, I haven't, but I
All
will
right.
now.
Hard to. Okay, so your homework is to go watch the show, the first episode, and then tell us if you like it.
All
So
right, I will.
awesome. This has been Francisco Quevedo, who is the executive director of the Rucker Center for Marketing Advancement and also professor at Rutgers. So thank you for coming on the show. It's been fun.
Thank you, Alec. Yeah, it's been fun. All right. Thank you so much.